Hello, my name's Jamie from Beacon Consultant Services. Thanks for tuning in to our second video on the A to Z of GDPR. Today we're going to be focusing on B for breaches. Now, GDPR defines this as a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure of, or access to personal data transmitted, stored, or otherwise processed. So quite a mouthful, I'm sure you'll agree, but a good way to look at it is that if you have processes in place that ensure the security of personal data and these fall down or someone acts outside of those, it could lead to a breach of personal data. So it's important to note that in certain circumstances, these need to be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office. In any circumstance, you should be recording these breaches within your organisation. But what you should do once you've recorded these breaches is to assess the likelihood versus the severity to see whether this is going to pose a risk to individuals' rights and freedoms. And if it does, then the ICO would need to be informed. Now, they need to be informed within 72 hours of the breach coming to light. So not a lot of time to play with, but what you do is send over as much of the information as you can up front, and if you're carrying on to assess the breach, then you'd send follow-up information as and when that becomes available within a reasonable time frame. You may also need to inform data subjects, so individuals who have had their data breached. So if, for example, a company accidentally disclosed an individual's bank details to another individual, then this would need to be reported to that individual to let them know that the breach had occurred so that they can take necessary steps to contact their bank to change their details, for example. If you do contact an individual, they need to be informed of the name and the contact details of the data protection officer of your organisation. They need to understand what the likely consequences of that breach are, and they need to know what measures you've put in place or are going to put in place to mitigate that breach. Now, I've seen a lot of breaches over the years as I've worked with organisations, a large range of them going from disciplinary notes left on an employee's desk overnight for anyone to see, for example, people reading personal data on a train, for example, and someone looking over their shoulder and seeing what they're reading, to files accidentally being sent to the wrong customer, so someone typing in an email address and accidentally putting the wrong email address and sending files over to the wrong customer. All examples of breaches that need to be recorded, assessed, and seen as to whether or not they should be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office. It's worth noting that failure to report these to the ICO where they should be could lead to more adverse consequences if the ICO got wind of that breach. So it's always best to notify the ICO, get that recorded, and put mitigating steps in place to fix that breach so that it can't happen again. So remember, you've got 72 hours to report those breaches from when it comes to light. But that's B for breaches anyway in a nutshell, and look out for our next video, which will be focusing on C for consent. Thank you.